I want to emphasize what Noe said, that the hardest thing on the immigrant detainees is the separation from their families. And this past fall, I think it was December, one day when we gathered to go in, I think I'd been away the week before, someone said to me, you know, one of the women here is from Jerusalem. So they pointed her out to me, and I went up to her to meet with her. And my first impression of her was that she was truly distraught. And when I spoke to her, I found out why. She has 3 children, ages 7, 4, and 2. And she had been living in Orland Park with her husband and the 3 children, and had been taken away from them. And she hadn't seen them, obviously, for a couple of weeks. And can you imagine a 2-year-old being without his mother? She hadn't been able to eat. The food in the jail was both not what she was used to and not what she would eat as a Muslim woman. It certainly was not halal. It included pork. And she said she'd lost weight and her hair was falling out, and she was having a very difficult time. Well, I met with her over a number of weeks, and I shared with her that I have a son who lives in Israel. And she said she loved Israel, she loved living in Jerusalem, and that the only reason that she was living in Chicago with a visa that had expired was to be with her husband. That she'd met him here on a visit, they'd gotten married, and she didn't have papers, but she didn't want to be separated from her husband. So I spoke with her husband on the phone, and she said that they had been in touch with the Israeli consulate and with immigration. I too made phone calls. When I called the consulate, they said, there's nothing we can do, it's all up to immigration. I called her immigration officer, and by that point, she had been told she was definitely going to be deported. And her issue was she wanted the children to be able to go back with her. But they wouldn't allow the information about what flight she was on to be told to anyone. And I talked to her immigration officer, who talked to his supervisor, and they said, well, no, we really can't make an exception. It's a security issue. Meanwhile, Serene's roommate was another woman who spoke Arabic from Somalia, and they got a lot of support from each other. And each time that each week when I visited with them, I could see that she had, that both women had become a support for each other, and they were no longer as distraught as they had been. So it was both that they were able to give each other support and that they were getting support from our ongoing visits. Well, Serene knew that she was going to be deported, and I told her that I was going to be in Israel in February to visit my children and grandchildren. And so we exchanged some phone numbers, and one day I talked to her, an immigration worker, who told me that she was going to be deported in another 10 days. And this was the day that I was going to the jail to visit. When I went to visit, when she walked in, she had a big grin on her face, because she also had gotten the information that finally she was going to be out of the jail and be able to go home. So she went home to Jerusalem, and what happened is, no, they would not give out the information about what plane she was on. Her brother, who was living in Chicago with papers, flew the children home later in the day, and if you can imagine a man escorting his nephews and niece of ages 7, 4, and 2, well, you know, he deserved a lot of credit, what can I say? Having traveled with young children, I know. But the next week, I got a phone call from Serene. She called me from Jerusalem. And she wanted to know when I was coming. And when I did arrive in Israel, I called her up, and we made a date to get together. And her father talked to me. Her father speaks English quite well. He also speaks Hebrew. We spoke in Hebrew and in English, and he wanted to know what did I eat, what didn't I eat, and you know, a whole menu. So they met us at the bus station in Jerusalem, and so I got to meet her parents and her children finally, and 3 of her sisters and 1 of her brothers, and we spent about 5 hours together. They were so grateful for the contact and the support that I had given Serene. I wasn't able to move anything. I wasn't able to get her out of there sooner. I wasn't able to make it so that her children could be with her. But just the fact that I was able to give her that contact and comfort meant so much to her family. And it meant so much to me to see her, first of all, not in an orange jumpsuit, in her normal clothes, to be able to meet her children, who she said the 2 younger ones will not let her out of their sight. They were separated from her for 6 weeks. And the thing of it is, she was willing to leave and go home, but she had to wait 6 weeks. You know, if they had come to her and told her, you've overstayed your visa, you have to go home, okay, she would have gone home with her children the next day, or, you know, soon. But to rip her from her children and put her in the jail, and what happened with her children and what happened with her whole family, that period of unnecessary disruption that they went through. And here was someone who was willing to go back where they came from. Think of all the people who we've met with people from Mexico who basically came here at the age of 4, and now say they're 34 and they're being sent back to Mexico. They don't have any ties with Mexico. They grew up here. So even all the more so in cases like that. So it was heartwarming to me to know, to be able to see her in her environment and to know that she's doing well, even though she really is separated from her husband. He has a Palestinian passport and can only come as far as Ramallah, which is about 20 miles from where she lives. She has an Israeli passport. But to know that she is again living a normal life gave me a lot of satisfaction.